life evolved. So they took a mixture of chemicals and ran it through these tubes and tried to create life in the laboratory. The experiment's been duplicated many, many times, always been a failure, and always created more problems for the evolutionist. This textbook says, although he never proved how life originated, he did add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself. That is a lie. All they did was create problems for the idea that life could have started by itself. This one says, swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Boy, it sure is. It don't even happen. That's how slow it is. There are several different articles that say life came from clay. Yep, got some clay together and poof, came alive on the bottom of the ocean. They did not address the origin of life in Darwin's book, and it's never been figured out since how life could have started. What he did is he took these 4 chemicals and put them in these glass tubes, made them circulate around, and tried to create life in the laboratory. This textbook says, many important events occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was the evolution of life. Progress from complex molecules to the simplest living organism was a very long process. I guess so. If you give it billions of years, somehow it looks more reasonable, you know. This one says, the first living cells emerged between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago. There is no record of the event. But you better believe it, and you're going to be tested on it. One of the lies in the textbooks is that they made life in the laboratory. They have, all they've done, every experiment has made the problem worse for the evolutionist, okay? They talk about how we all came from this early life form. Once this first life form got started, this single cell, then it evolved into everything else. Like this textbook shows the kids that a bacteria slowly evolved to a human. These trees of life are absolute propaganda. There is no evidence for any of these, okay? Even Mary Leakey said, those trees of life with the branches of our ancestors, that's a lot of nonsense, okay? Stephen Gould said the evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks are not the evidence of fossils, that's for sure. There is no evidence that any animal is related to any other kind of animal. But this textbook says, all the many forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. There's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism. If it's alive, it's complicated. It's one of the lies you're going to have to face in your textbook. The Bible says if you offend one of these little ones, you'd be better off with a millstone about your neck. Go swimming. These folks teaching evolution are in serious trouble when they stand before God. Darwin speculated all forms of life are related. This speculation has been verified. They are lying to your kids. Nothing about DNA has helped with the evolution theory at all. DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, is the most complex molecule in the universe. Unbelievably complicated molecule. That little DNA molecule, average person has 50 trillion cells in their body with 46 of those little molecules in each cell. 46 chromosome strands in each cell of your body. If you extracted all of it, it would only fill about 2 tablespoons. But if you took those DNA strands and unwound them, stretched them out, tied them together, one person's DNA would reach from Earth to the moon and back over 500,000 times. Round trips to the moon. David said, I will praise thee, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And he didn't have a microscope, and he could figure that out. Yeah. You know, from conception to birth, the baby adds 15,000 cells per minute to its body. Each one is more complicated than a space shuttle. How come the evolutionists are always comparing things that fit their theory? Why don't they show us the things that don't fit their theory? One of the lies they face in the textbooks is this idea that all these similarities prove a common ancestor. Evolution's a shell game. Everybody thinks that somebody else has the evidence. The biologist says, oh, we don't have it. The geologist has it. The geologist says, oh, we don't have it. The anthropologist has it. It's a shell game with one major difference. You know how they put the P down there and try to get you confused, you know, which one has the P? The difference is there's no P under any of them. Nobody has the evidence. Nobody. They're all lying.
Creation science evangelism began in 1989. With over 30 years of research, CSE has become a trusted source of information on the creation-evolution debate. For more information or resources, visit our website, drdino.com. We hope that you enjoyed this DVD, and feel free to pass it on to somebody else you think might like this information. If you'd like to contact our ministry, you can write us at 29 Cummings Road, Pensacola, Florida 32503, or send an email to comments@drdino.com. You could also call our ministry toll-free inside the U.S., 877-479-3466. Now, let me give you the bottom line. The scientific evidence that contends the earth is not billions of years old. It points to a time when the world was different, as in before the flood. And dinosaurs have always lived with man, and the only evidence supporting the evolution theory in the textbooks are lies. Now, if creation is true, that means there is a creator, and he owns this world. He can even put rules down for our benefit, and he did. He gave us the 10 Commandments. The Bible says he even wrote those rules onto our hearts, and our conscience bears witness to that. Now, our conscience is a word that means with knowledge. Let's see what you've done with knowledge. Have you ever told a lie? Come on, be honest. What do you call somebody that tells a lie? You say, well, I wouldn't be a liar. Well, sure you would. Have you ever taken something that doesn't belong to you? That's called stealing. Yeah, you would be a thief. Have you ever disobeyed your parents? Who hasn't, right? Have you ever used God's name in vain? That is called blasphemy. It's a very serious sin. The Bible says the Lord will not hold him guiltless who taketh his name in vain. Hey, another commandment says you should not commit adultery. Then Jesus came along and said in the New Testament, if you've even looked with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. So far, we've only gone through 5 of the 10 Commandments, and you and I are guilty of breaking all of them. Now, we haven't even looked at the other 5. When God says, hey, if you don't murder, you say, well, I haven't killed anybody. Then Jesus said, if you've even hated in your heart, you're guilty of murder. So when we stand before God on Judgment Day and he judges us by his perfect law, the 10 Commandments, would you be innocent or guilty? You'd be guilty, just like the rest of us. Therefore, would you go to heaven or would you go to hell? I meet a lot of people who say, I'd still go to heaven. I say, well, how's that? Why would you do that? They say, well, I think God is a good God, and he's going to forgive me. I say, you're right about one thing. He is a good God. But it's because of his goodness that he has to punish sin. See, a good God cannot allow liars and thieves and adulterers and at heart and disobedient children and blasphemers into a perfect heaven. A fine must be paid. If we were in a court of law here on earth and you were to stand before the judge and be found guilty of a crime, and at the end, after the judge pronounced you guilty, you say, Judge, I think you're a good judge. Will you forgive me? He'll say, you're right about one thing. I am a good judge, and it's because of my goodness that I must punish this crime. And the very thing many people are thinking is going to get them into heaven is going to actually be what sends them to an eternity in hell. The Bible says the soul that sins, it shall die. The proof of your sin will be your death. So honestly, if you were to stand before God and to be judged by the 10 Commandments, innocent or guilty, heaven or hell. You know, when we get real honest with ourselves, we'd have to admit that we would go to hell. Does that concern you? It should. God talks a lot about hell. It says it is a terrible place, not some big party that people try to portray today. It's a place where the fire is not quenched, the worm dieth not, your thirst is never satisfied, and there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Hey, if it does concern you, then I've got